Our initial reaction shouldn't shock anyone. We've been actually quite outspoken about the process from the get-go. I believe we have a number of press releases and information out to our members, kind of throughout the whole process as we move through it. And we continue today to be very concerned with the recommendations and what the report does contain.
Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Today we're talking about a strategy that was supposed to secure Alberta's energy future, but may be instead shifting the burden onto rural municipalities. Earlier this month, the Government of Alberta released its long-awaited Mature Asset Strategy, or MAS, a plan that, according to the province, is meant to support the viability of older oil and gas wells, keep companies operating longer, and maintain energy security. But the Rural Municipalities of Alberta is saying not so fast. In a strongly worded statement, RMA called the report disappointing, unclear, and dangerously narrow in the scope, criticizing it for prioritizing industry profits over public accountability. Missing from the strategy, according to the RMA, are any meaningful plans to address unpaid property taxes, surface lease payments, or environmental liabilities, issues that have left many rural municipalities footing the bill. Now, the strategy, they say, leans heavily on industry narratives without offering data, transparency, or inclusive input from other stakeholders like landowners, environmental groups, or rural Albertans themselves. And while it skirts major changes to municipal taxation, it still pushes the idea, without evidence according to the RMA, that property taxes are somewhat holding the industry back. So, today on Municipal Affairs, we're digging into the heart of these concerns with someone who has been at the table through the MAS process and isn't afraid to speak out. Joining us is Cara Westerland, president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. She's here to break down what this strategy means for rural municipalities, where the process fell short, and what needs to happen next to ensure industry prosperity doesn't come at the expense of municipal survival. So stick around, as this is a conversation you do not want to miss. Across Canada, our cities, towns, villages, and rural communities are alive with stories waiting to be told. Stories of innovation and economic development, resilience in the face of the housing challenges, and the financial hurdles municipalities overcome every day. At the Cross Border Network, we bring these stories to life. From coast to coast to coast, we're connecting Canadians to the issues shaping our communities and showcasing the people working tirelessly to make them thrive. With your support, we can expand our reach, amplify more voices, and shine a light on the challenges and triumphs of municipal life. For as little as $3.99 a month, you can help us grow and continue sharing the stories that matter most. Join us today and be part of this important mission. Together, we can tell more stories, build stronger communities, and make a real difference. Support the Cross Border Network now. Visit www.crossborderinterviews.ca today. President, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about the long-awaited provincial report around mature asset strategy. I want to just get your initial thoughts and reaction to the report that kind of dropped in the middle of a week and no one really paid attention to it, but you did. And what did you see in that report?
Well, we are always paying attention and paying very close attention. Anything to do with mature asset strategies or unpaid oil and gas taxes. Our initial reaction shouldn't shock anyone. We've been actually quite outspoken about the process from the get-go. I believe we have a number of press releases and information out to our members, kind of throughout the whole process as we move through it. And we continue today to be very concerned with the recommendations and what the report does contain.
Now, the report did have some nuggets in there, and I want to talk about a few, but I want to start by going into something that you just talked about in that unpaid taxes. Now, you and I have chatted about this a few times already since you've become president, but just generally, how has the unpaid taxes from oil and gas companies impacted rural municipalities across Alberta?
Well, it's a very large number. $259.3 million dollars is outstanding to our members. And that's massive. That affects everything from operations and trying to keep the lights on within our facilities. It's your graders on the road, snow clearing, right down to economic development projects within the community, infrastructure projects. So it is substantial. And I'm going to be brutally honest. At the end of the day, we know we're not going to recover the majority of that money. We know that a large portion of that owing to municipalities is by insolvent and bankrupt companies. But what we need to focus on with the unpaid oil and gas taxes is to look at the legislative issues and the gaps within regulations to stop this from continuing down the future. On that point, we do know 100 million is owed by companies that continue to operate as we speak right now. So that needs to stop too as well.
So, in the report, which I had the pleasure to peruse over the week and after your press release came out, the report claims that property taxes are an outsized, and I'm quoting the report here, outsized burden on industry, but and this could be just me missing it, but I just need to get your opinion on it. Provides no evidence to the contrary that property taxes from municipalities are putting that burden on these mature assets. What reality do you think this report is ignoring around the property tax issue that these mature assets are dealing with?
Well, it was a glaring issue right from the get-go with this process. Numbers were being tossed around and innuendos were being tossed around. We could repeatedly and continue today to call for the data and the numbers that were used to come up with the recommendations, and to prove out, just frankly, just prove that the taxes are a issue with the oil and gas companies. We know from enough looking into what data is available from private companies and what data is out there that when companies and businesses look at communities, the tax rate generally is about, sixth or seventh down the list on when they look at where they're going to be placed, and the pressures it does put on to the expenses of a company. So we know that that's just generally known facts. So it's been really difficult throughout this process, because there was a lot of talk about municipalities being, kind of a bigger issue than we truly are. And at the end of the day, the money that we do collect from these oil and gas companies isn't spent willy-nilly within our communities. It's the backbone to providing infrastructure and infrastructure that serves oil and gas industry. It's our roads, it's our bridges, it's our culverts. It's a huge piece of what we do. And a lot of that, look at any municipal budget, it's always public and online, and you can see the large majority of rural municipalities money goes into public works.
If the property taxes aren't the main barrier to asset viability for these mature assets, what factors do you believe are impacting these these mature assets across rural Alberta today?
Well, just being, a lowly public servant, but I've also got a little bit of business background. So I don't want to speculate or try and insinuate what companies are up to and why they are in such a financial hardship. But I mean, to be honest with you, it's pretty easy to figure out, if you've owned a business or you've been in management. You know what some of the issues are when a company is operating. I'd say either outside the lines or kind of riding that line.
You said in the RMA press release that the MAS seems to prioritize industry profitability over accountability. Can you elaborate on what true accountability looks like from an RMA perspective around these mature assets?
Well, it's pretty easy, being a responsible business owner and responsible company in this province to me means you pay your property taxes. It means you pay your dues where they're needed. We're beating up on oil and gas industry, and I want to be really careful because we are talking about a handful of companies out there that continue to operate kind of what I see outside the normal good business practices within the province. We produce the most ethical oil in the world, and we should be proud of it. And we shouldn't be allowing this handful of companies and these bad actors to even exist on our landscape. And it's shocking because I am really proud. I mean, I'm from Brazeau County, and I'm really proud of the oil and gas industry and the men and women who go to work every day to keep the heat in our houses and the gas in our tanks. And I think it's just time that we say enough is enough with the handful that are causing us these issues. Like I said, it requires some legislative changes, some regulation changes as well, and we can move on from here.
But I'm going to play a little devil's advocate with you for a second because you know, and we've chatted about this a few times, and I've chatted with this about a few municipalities, that one bad actor paints the whole entire industry with a very broad stroke. And I say that knowing that one bad municipal councillor, not saying that there is one, but one bad
Yeah.
municipal councillor paints the entire municipal sector with a bad brush. What are you hearing from those who are those good actors who are actually following through, paying their property taxes, ensuring that their assets are looked after in a timely fashion? Because as RMA president, I'm assuming you're not just talking to the bad actors, or hopefully trying to talk to the bad actors. You're talking to the good actors in this scenario as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we are definitely. We keep in close contact with the quote unquote the good actors within the community, but they know too as well. At the end of the day, we know it's a legislation and a regulation issue, and they know about it too as well. They're just not as vocal as we are. But you know what? That's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing either. You know, they're just focused on getting to work, making their company money, and kind of focusing on themselves and what they're doing. And that's okay too. The other ones that you're starting to hear a little bit more from, which I think is a very big positive, is we talk about obviously unpaid oil and gas taxes and the issues that the municipalities are facing, but we're often not the first ones to be not paid. Vendors, so our service industry and our service companies tend to be the first hit with this, as well as our surface rights. So those are our farmers and our acreage owners who have, uh, equipment on their yard, whether it's pump jack, risers or a pipeline running through their property. They tend to be kind of front of the line before the municipalities are hit. The other issue, and the other one that I will highlight, because I did ask the energy minister and Minister Rick McIver with Municipal Affairs directly, these companies must not be paying their royalties either. And obviously, there is a mechanism in place that if they're not paying their royalties, you put a stop to it, which I was confirmed.
We'll jump back to that in about 2 seconds. But in the press release, you noted that the absence of this report of sectors like the agriculture sector, the service rights advocates, what impact do you believe that this exclusion of these groups could have had on the final report? And if what impact would they have had if they were included in this report? Because it seems like a very big error, a very two big, very big sectors to ignore when we're talking about this mature asset strategy.
And it is, and it was one of the issues that we were vocal about from the beginning. We knew there was key players and key stakeholders and key partners that were missing from the table throughout these discussions. Hence, why we were so concerned about the industry heavy point and group that was kind of steering and leading this conversation. We were definitely outnumbered at the table. I think it would be, and it was a huge miss on the part of the GOA not to have those stakeholders included. It would have balanced the conversation out, and I think we would have been able to come to some solutions. While I don't think all sides would be happy, but that's just the way life is and the way negotiations roll sometimes. And I generally, I mean, I've been in politics, or sorry, I shouldn't say politics. I've been in municipal government for 15 years. Generally speaking, things are a success when both sides aren't happy, and it's just a reality of what we do. But it was definitely a huge voice, huge voices that were missing at the table that I think are incredibly valuable. Their points of view and the facts and the issues that they're facing are just as valid as ours are.
The term mature, I want to make sure I read this one correctly because I wrote it and I thought it was really good when I asked this question. The term mature asset truly remains undefined during the process of this MAS report. How critical was the ambiguity of and integrity in usefulness of this strategy to not define what mature asset is? Because I'm assuming what mature asset means to one company is completely different to another.
Absolutely, you just nailed it on the head there. What mature asset or what mature asset means to me is going to be different from you. It's going to be different from your viewers and from your listeners, and that was a huge issue. And from the initial meeting that we had, we pointed that out. It is hard to come up with a strategy or recommendations when we don't have clear definitions and clear parameters of what we're trying to work within. And I think there's a few cases in here where it was kind of loosely commented on what may be a mature asset, but that's not, there's nothing in concrete. So with that just proved again to some of the difficulties in the conversations that we did have. And I know I seen definitions scribbled down on paper in different meetings, but nothing was ever in black and white presented to the group. And this is the parameters that you're working with.
So what does mature asset mean to RMA then?
Well, it's going to mean a whole pile of things, and that's the issue with it is we need to sit down with industry. We need to have the agricultural sector there. We need to have surface rights sitting at the table. We need RMA at the table. We need industry at the table so that we can come up with a definition that we can all live and work with.
Now, you talk about your meeting with Minister Jean and Minister McIver about property rights and property taxes, unpaid property taxes, but also those royalties, which they seem to be getting their mechanism to get their royalties from these zombie companies. Has the government in these early days given any indication that they may revisit or revise the MAS in light of your criticism and I'm assuming other criticism that they might be hearing from the agriculture sector, the land rights service sector as well?
On Strictly on the mature assets strategy side, we haven't heard too much yet, but we did get some movement on the unpaid oil and gas taxes. Obviously, during our convention in March, Minister McIver and Minister Jean both sat down and said that we are going to form a task force moving forward. We are in the early stages right now. We did have a meeting actually right after the conference with both those ministries. So staff right now are just working out the terms of references and the details behind what that's going to look like. And I remain really optimistic and really positive. I believe it's a step forward. I think right now the group looks like it's going to be a group of about 17 of stakeholders and partners, industry, municipals, government, and those that need to be at the table. I don't want to get the group too big. I know I'm getting lots of calls and emails and text messages, and people want to be on the group, but we got to be really cautious. We're not going to get anything accomplished when there's 40 of us sitting down either. And it's going to be about streamlining. And actually, the other piece to this too is I've been on the board now for 8 years, and I really want to focus in on workable and long-term solutions and try and put the rest of the noise out and really narrow down what the focus is going to be so that we can have, you know what, and I'm fine if we have one or two or three recommendations that come out of what this task force works on. To me, that could be a win. We don't need to have 30 or 40. I think the solution to this issue is actually pretty simple. I know it's an incredibly complex issue and very challenging, but I think if we focus on the simplicity of it, I think we can get ahead.
Okay. So I am going to play in that sandbox for a few seconds here because we have not chatted since the announcement of the committee formation from the provincial government sitting down with RMA. Um, I am gonna be very pointed in this question, and I apologize if it comes out of left field, but this is a strategy that is going to come up with a report a year from now, 6 months from now, 8 months from now. But you and I will both agree probably that municipalities can't wait 6 to 8 months. They need this solved today. They need it solved yesterday. They need it solved 5 years ago when this first issue was coming about and it was rearing its ugly head. In the long term, it's great. But what do municipalities do in the short term? Because I can imagine there are reeves right now looking at their budget going, well, guess we have to hold off on another 5 projects or 5 bridges because these zombie companies are screwing us around. What's your response to those reeves who say this committee is not what we need today? It was what we needed 6 years ago.
I agree with that, and that's the difficulties that we're facing on the landscape. We're into April right now, and I don't for a second forget that. And I, as my municipality just passed our final budget yesterday, my municipality is owed over $1 million too as well. That's huge. It's huge. It's infrastructure projects. It's and like I said, it is in some municipalities about just trying to keep the lights on right now and employ the handful of people that they have left. I got a municipality up in the north that's owed 34% of their revenue from one company, and it's unpaid oil and gas taxes. The unfortunate or kind of the fortunate part of this is this isn't anything new. Most, unfortunately and fortunately, most municipalities are already budgeting for these losses. They've already taken into account for their budgets in the last 4 or 5 years, so this year's no different. And it's unfortunate. And I feel the pain too. And I know there's a lot of members they're in dire straits for sure. And it is really difficult. I mean, I think, Chris, you're getting to know a lot of the elected officials in the municipal government. We are such a passionate people. We truly are the last government that represents the people. And we pour our blood, sweat, and tears into trying to make our communities a better place, trying to leave them in a better spot for our children, our grandchildren. And it's incredibly difficult. And you and I could probably talk for hours on the downloading from the provincial government that we've been facing too. So you add that into the mix on top of the other issues that we're facing. But I will try and stay resilient. It's one thing that I've come to learn and I've come to witness over my years in office is Albertans are an incredibly resilient people. When we are walking through hell, quite literally, the best solutions and the best steps forwards are taken from out of the ashes, and we literally arise out of the ashes. And I know we can do it. We will continue to do it. We will continue to fight the good fight. And I'm so fortunate to work with so many capable elected officials across this province, and to have the residents and the people who live in this province understand and take care of their communities. So I know it started out kind of a negative question, but I'm going to try and spin it on the positive side. And I know I truly do believe in my heart that Albertans are resilient, our communities are resilient, and we will figure this out.
While this committee is an olive branch, and I will admit that it is an olive branch for the RMA to have this committee formed and to sit down with the province and stakeholders along with municipalities to come to a reasonable solution around this challenge. Um, what are you hearing from the province to give you hope that this is not just going to be a report that sits on the table in Edmonton and actually doesn't get anything done? Because I know your predecessor, Paul McLaughlin, yourself have been calling on the provincial government to do something, to ask AER to do something around this, but it seems like it's being fallen on deaf ears. Are you hopeful that this committee that the province and RMA is striking up is going to be the catalyst that actually makes rural municipal leaders a little bit happier in 2026 when the next number comes out about how much these unpaid oil and gas companies owe to the RMA?
I have no doubt that we are going to get some positive and some good recommendations, the legislative changes, and the regulation gaps that exist. I truly believe that we're gonna be able to hone in on those, close those gaps. It's going to take us, like I said, I know it's not going to happen overnight, but it's a fight that I'm willing to fight. I've been on the board for 8 years. I think this government and certain ministers are learning quite quickly. I am quite vocal, but I'm critical too. I'm not always negative, and I'm not always pushing back. And I hate the blame game. I always truly believe if you've got an issue and if you're going to play the blame game, you better have the solutions and be willing to roll your sleeves up and do the work to get the results and find those solutions. So I am committed to doing that. And the other issue, I think a few of them have realized is I'm not quiet and I'm not going anywhere. So
Amen.
let's get this figured out.
I want to go back to the MAS report for a second before I let you go because I'm cautious of time. While this is a report and it is something that the province is going to be moving forward on, what are your hopes and your wishes for the next steps in response to this MAS report? And how do you plan to advocate for changes? Because it sounds like there are some changes that RMA is looking for when it comes to this MAS report.
Well, we've been pushing back. We will continue to push back. Obviously, I think I've been very clear that we are not happy with any of the recommendations.
Yeah.
And as any of this moves forward, we will be pushing back with solutions. And that being said, I really hope that, and when we have put that call out, asking for kind of the restructuring and a resit down, maybe a second sober thought, sober look at what the recommendations are, where this report's going to, and we will continue to push those levers as hard as we can.
What's the one thing you want people to know about this report, about what we've talked about in the last 25 minutes that we haven't talked about around this mature asset strategy and the unpaid oil and gas property taxes that RMA members are sort of required to have to operate that we haven't talked about yet?
I think your listeners and your viewers know that RMA and our perspective always comes from a very firm but very fair background. We make sure that we have the data and the facts backing what we're asking for before we put our foot forward. The other issue is, and I'm sure that everyone has picked up on it, but this was heavily industry led. And it's pretty hard to find recommendations and solutions when the fox is in the hen house.
True that. President Westerland, I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for sitting down. Always a pleasure to sit down and chat with you because I always learn so much about what's going on in the RMA world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for all that you do for us.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, if you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, or follow us on social media. To learn more about the communities and the people we feature on this show, please visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Now, your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs later this week. Till then, everyone.